Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a landmark United Nations report that makes a pretty bold declaration. It says the time for reparatory justice for the legacies of slavery and colonialism is right now. We're going to break down what that actually means and why this conversation is really picking up steam all across the globe. So, a UN working group of experts on people of African descent just released its findings, and their conclusion? It's completely unambiguous. They're saying that the damage from the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism runs so deep that reparatory justice isn't just an option, it's an absolute necessity. And that's the core question, isn't it? The answer is way more complex than just a single payment or a quick apology. To really get what the UN group is saying, we have to unpack the whole framework they're proposing. So let's dive right in. Okay, so the entire argument in this report is built on one really crucial idea. We're not just talking about things that happened a long time ago. The working group frames these injustices as the living root of harms that are still happening to this day. According to the experts cited in the report, you can literally see the echoes of these historical crimes in today's systemic racism and structural inequality. As the UN's Deputy Secretary General put it, these legacies are still affecting people of African descent every single day. This quote from South Africa's ambassador really gets to the heart of the moral and legal argument here. The key idea is that a crime against humanity is so unbelievably severe that it just transcends any normal time limit. In other words, the call for justice never, ever expires. So if the harm is this complex and it's still ongoing, what does the solution even look like? Well, the report makes it super clear that we're not just talking about writing a check. The framework they're proposing is way, way bigger than that. At its core, you can think of reparatory justice as a comprehensive toolkit. The goal isn't just to compensate someone. It's to actually repair, to heal, and to transform societies in a way that addresses the full, massive scope of the harm that was done. And this slide basically lays out the playbook. 5 internationally recognized forms of reparation. First up is restitution. We're talking about things like returning stolen land or cultural artifacts. Then there's compensation for financial damages. Third is rehabilitation, which means providing critical medical and social services. Fourth, you have satisfaction. This includes public apologies, memorials, really telling the truth about what happened. And finally, and this one is maybe the most important, guarantees of non-repetition, actually reforming institutions to make sure these kinds of atrocities can never, ever happen again. Now, as you can probably imagine, getting from a principle like that to actually putting it into practice involves a super intense and complicated debate. The report really documents all the different sides of this conversation, the legal, the economic, and the social. A central legal argument you'll hear, articulated here by Professor Rosemarie Bell-Antoine, is that if you classify enslavement as a crime against humanity, then there's just no expiration date on the demand for justice, period. But the report also gets real about the legal pushback. So on one side, you've got the argument that enslavement violates a jus cogens norm. That's a fancy term for a principle that's so fundamental it basically overrides all other laws. But on the other hand, panelists pointed out the counterargument of the intertemporal principle. Now, this is the idea that you can only judge past actions by the laws that existed at that time. And that's a huge hurdle, because it argues that since slavery wasn't illegal under international law back then, you can't go back and apply today's standards. This is really the core legal tension in the whole debate. And this brings us to such a crucial point made by the panelists. This isn't just about settling some old historical debt. It's about fixing what is still broken right now. As human rights attorney Roger Wareham put it, reparations have to address ongoing systemic racism, not just historical chattel enslavement. And this stat just brilliantly illustrates that connection to today. An expert at this session, Isaac Ntiasare, pointed to algorithmic bias as a modern legacy. What is that? Well, simply put, it's when a computer system reflects the hidden biases of the humans who built it or the data it learned from. This number is just staggering. It shows how brand new technologies can actually inherit and even amplify old prejudices, creating totally new forms of discrimination. So, how do we get from all these complex arguments to actual real-world action? Well, the report also lays out some concrete pathways that were proposed during the UN sessions. So to put these ideas into practice, experts suggested this multi-pronged international strategy. You've got ambitious ideas like a new international tribunal, but also really practical tools like a UN handbook and a review system to keep everyone accountable. And you'll notice there's a real emphasis on regional leadership, with calls for an African-led reparations fund and much stronger teamwork. And hey,
It's not just about the UN. The report points out a huge groundswell of activity happening everywhere. Colombia has set up a national commission, New York City is studying the legacy of enslavement, and panelists noted that over 70 local reparations commissions have popped up all across the United States, all driven by grassroots organizing.
The important thing to remember here is that this report didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's actually a key moment in a movement that has been building for decades and is now very clearly picking up speed on the world stage. You can see the progression right here on this timeline. It really kicks off with the landmark Durban Declaration in 2001, which was the first to officially call enslavement a crime against humanity. Then you have the Caribbean community, CARICOM, creating a super detailed action plan. And looking ahead, the African Union has already named 2025 the Year of Reparations. And there's a call for the UN to hold a global conference on this in 2026. The momentum is just undeniable.
And that's really the ultimate takeaway here. This UN report marks a major shift in the global conversation. By laying out all the principles, the arguments, and the possible ways forward, it has firmly placed the incredibly complex, incredibly challenging, but essential question of how on the international agenda for years to come.